Marcus Chun had never imagined that losing his unit would lead him to the most important mission of his life. The transport ship Valiant Dawn shuddered as another plasma blast tore through its hull, sending debris floating through the corridors like deadly confetti. Emergency lights cast everything in hellish red as the artificial gravity failed in sections, leaving bodies and equipment tumbling through space. All hands, abandon ship. This is not a drill. The captain's voice crackled through the dying communication system, barely audible over the screaming of twisted metal and escaping atmosphere. Marcus grabbed his pulse rifle and emergency pack, his enhanced combat armor automatically sealing against the vacuum that was rapidly claiming the ship. Through the transparent, aluminum viewing ports, he could see the sleek, predatory forms of Zephyrian attack cruisers closing in for the kill. Their ships moved like living things, all curves and organic lines that seemed to flow rather than fly through space. The evacuation pods were already launching, small silver dots fleeing into the star-speckled void. Marcus sprinted down the tilting corridor, his magnetic boots keeping him anchored to what remained of the deck plating. Behind him, sections of the ship were going dark as power systems failed and life support died. He reached Pod Bay 7 just as the last escape vessel sealed its doors. Through the porthole, he could see terrified faces looking back at him. The Bay Chief, a grizzled veteran named Kowalski, was frantically working the manual override. "Sylvie, so," Kowalski shouted over the chaos. "She's overloaded already. Find another pod." But Marcus knew there weren't any others. The ship was dying around them, and he was trapped. He watched the pod launch, carrying the last survivors to safety, while he remained behind on a vessel that had maybe minutes left before complete structural failure. The hull breach came faster than expected. A massive section of the outer wall simply vanished, sucked away into space along with everything not bolted down. Marcus felt the irresistible pull of vacuum and fought against it, his armor's emergency thrusters firing to keep him from being swept away. But the suction was too strong, and his fuel was limited. As consciousness faded and his oxygen supply dwindled, Marcus's last coherent thought was of his sister Sarah, safe on Earth, who would never know what happened to her brother among the distant stars. When awareness returned, it came slowly and with confusion. Marcus found himself lying on something soft, breathing air that tasted faintly of flowers and ozone. His combat armor had been removed, replaced by simple gray clothing that felt strange against his skin. The room around him was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls curved organically, seeming to grow from the floor rather than being constructed. They had a pearl-like quality that shifted between colors as the light changed, creating patterns that were almost hypnotic. There were no sharp corners anywhere, no straight lines that spoke of human engineering. Everything flowed together as if shaped by wind and water over countless years. "You are awake, human soldier." The voice made Marcus sit up quickly, his hand automatically reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Standing near what might have been a door was a figure that took his breath away. She was tall and graceful, with skin that had the same pearl-like quality as the walls, shifting between pale blue and silver as she moved. Her hair was long and white, flowing like liquid mercury, and her eyes were the deep purple of twilight skies. She wore robes that seemed to be made of captured starlight, moving and shimmering with each breath. Despite her alien appearance, there was something unmistakably regal about her bearing. This was someone accustomed to command, to being obeyed without question. "I am Lyralii, Queen of the Zephyrian Star Kingdom," she said, her voice carrying an accent that made even simple words sound like music. "You are aboard my flagship, the Celestial Harmony." Marcus struggled to his feet, his military training taking over despite the surreal situation. "Sergeant Marcus Chun, United Earth Defense Force. Serial number, Peace, Human." Queen Lyralii raised a hand that seemed to glow with inner light. "You are not a prisoner here. My healers worked through the night to save your life. Your injuries were severe, but your species appears remarkably resilient. My ship, Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Gone. I'm sorry. Your people fought bravely, but the battle was already decided before we arrived. Her expression grew sad, and Marcus was surprised to see what looked like genuine regret in those alien features. Then why save me? Why not let me die with my crew? Queen Lyralii moved closer, and Marcus caught a scent like rain on summer grass. Because you did something no Zephyrian warrior would have done. When your ship was dying, when the evacuation pods were launching, my sensors detected you. You had reached an escape pod, but you turned back. Marcus frowned, trying to remember through the chaos of those final moments. The medical bay. There were wounded who couldn't be moved. Yes, you returned to a section of the ship that was already breached, where the life support had failed, to attempt a rescue that was clearly impossible. You nearly died, trying to save 3 beings who were already beyond help. The Queen's eyes seemed to glow brighter. Among my people, such actions are the stuff of legend. We value honor above all else, and you displayed more honor in those moments than most warriors show in a lifetime. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. I just did what anyone would do. No, human Marcus. You did what few would do, and that is why you now live while others have joined the great song. She gestured toward the curved walls, and Marcus noticed for the first time that they seemed to pulse gently, like a living heartbeat. My ship herself chose to save you. The celestial harmony is more than metal and energy. She is alive in ways your science might not understand, and she recognized something in you worth preserving. The implications of her words were staggering. A living ship? Marcus had heard rumors of alien biotechnology, but nothing like this. And if the Queen was telling the truth about the rescue mission, what happens to me now? He asked. Queen Lyralii smiled, and it was like watching a sunrise. That depends entirely on you, Marcus Chun. You could ask to be returned to your people, and I would arrange for safe passage to the nearest human world. Or, she paused, studying his face intently. You could remain here and learn our ways. There is much about humans that intrigues me, and perhaps much you could teach us in return. Before Marcus could answer, the chamber filled with a low, harmonious sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Queen Lyralii's expression changed instantly, becoming alert and focused. Forgive me, but duty calls. The court requires my attention. She moved toward the door, then paused. Think on what I have said, Marcus Chun. Tomorrow we will speak again, and you can give me your decision. Until then, you are free to explore the ship, though I would advise staying within the guest quarters. My people are not yet accustomed to human visitors. After she left, Marcus sank back onto the bed-like structure, his mind reeling. Everything he thought he knew about the war, about the enemy, was suddenly turned upside down. The Zephyrians weren't the mindless aggressors Earth's propaganda had painted them as. They had culture, honor, technology that bordered on magic. And their queen had saved his life for reasons he barely understood. He stood and walked to what appeared to be a window, though it might have been some kind of viewing screen. Outside, space stretched endlessly, filled with more stars than he had ever seen from Earth. But closer, moving in formation around the celestial harmony, were dozens of other Zephyrian ships. The entire fleet had organic beauty the human vessels lacked, flowing through space like schools of luminous fish. Among all those ships, carrying thousands of alien beings, he was the only human, the only survivor of a battle that had cost hundreds of lives. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. But there was something else, too, a curiosity that surprised him. What would it be like to live among these people? To learn their customs, their technology, their way of seeing the universe? For the first time since waking up, Marcus began to consider that maybe survival was more than just staying alive. Maybe it was about finding a new purpose among the stars. The decision he had to make would change everything. He could return to Earth, report what he had learned, and spend the rest of his life wondering what might have been. Or he could step into the unknown, guided by an alien queen who saw something in him worth saving. As he watched the star patterns slowly shift outside the viewing port, Marcus Chun began to understand that his real journey was just beginning. The boy who had left Earth to serve his species was gone, lost in the wreckage of the valiant dawn. What remained was something new, something shaped by honor and sacrifice and the strange mercy of an enemy who had become something else entirely. Tomorrow, he would give Queen Lyralii his answer. Tonight, he would try to understand what it meant to be the only human in an alien fleet, carrying the hopes and fears of two species that were still learning how to see each other as something more than targets in a war that had gone on too long. The morning cycle on the celestial harmony began with a sound like distant music flowing through the organic corridors and waking the ship's inhabitants gently. Marcus had barely slept, his mind too full of questions and possibilities to find rest. When Queen Lyralii returned to his quarters, she brought with her a small entourage that made Marcus acutely aware of how little he understood about Zephyrian society. The beings with her were clearly high-ranking officials, their robes more elaborate and their bearing even more formal than the Queen's. One carried what appeared to be a living crystal that pulsed with inner light, while another held a device that looked like flowing water held in an invisible container. Marcus Chun, Queen Lyralii, said, her voice carrying the same musical quality he remembered. "Have you considered my offer?" "I have, Your Majesty." Marcus straightened, falling back on military protocol when diplomacy seemed beyond him. "But I need to understand what staying would mean. I'm a soldier, not a diplomat or scientist. What could I possibly offer your people?" One of the officials, a tall male with skin that shifted between green and gold, stepped forward. His expression was skeptical, perhaps even hostile. "Honored Queen, this creature knows nothing of our ways. It would be like trying to teach a stone to sing. The Council has discussed this matter, and we believe the human should be returned to its own kind before it causes disruption to our harmony." Marcus felt anger flare at being called creature, but Queen Lyralii raised her hand before he could respond. "Careful, Veilthir. You speak of disruption, but perhaps what our people need is exactly that." Her eyes never left Marcus's face. "Answer honestly, human. What do you know of our war? What does your species believe about why we fight?" Marcus hesitated. Truth seemed important here, even if it wasn't flattering. "We were told that the Zephyrian Empire was expanding aggressively into human space, that your people saw us as inferior and wanted to claim our world for resources." The Queen's advisor, Veilthir, made a sound that might have been laughter, but held no humor. "Empire? Is that what they call our kingdom? And expansion?" He gestured toward the viewing port where stars wheeled slowly past. "Human, we have been fleeing for 3 generations." "Fleeing?" Marcus turned to Queen Lyralii, confused. "From what?" "From the Devourers," she said quietly. "The enemy that consumed our home worlds, that turned entire star systems into feeding grounds for their hunger. We came to this region of space seeking refuge, not conquest. When we encountered human colonies, we hoped for allies. Instead, we found suspicion and fear." Marcus felt the ground of his understanding shift beneath him. "But the attacks on our settlements were responses to attacks on our refugee ships," Veilthir said coldly. "Your military fired first, always. We defended ourselves, but each battle pushed us further from our goal of finding a new home." The Queen moved to the viewing port, her robes trailing behind her like captured starlight. 3 years ago, the last of our people arrived through the quantum gates before the Devourers could follow. 100 million Zephyrians, all that remains of a civilization that once numbered in the billions. We need worlds where we can rebuild, but every human system treats us as invaders. Marcus absorbed this, his worldview cracking like a broken shell. "Why didn't you try to communicate this to Earth Command?" "We did." Queen Lyralii turned back to him, and he saw pain in her alien features. "Many times, our messages were dismissed as propaganda or simply ignored. Your species seems to prefer war to understanding. That's not fair, Marcus said, then immediately wondered why he was defending policies he had never questioned before. Isn't it? The queen approached him, moving with that flowing grace that seemed natural to her people. You yourself believed we were aggressors until moments ago. You fought us without ever asking why we were here or what we truly wanted. The truth of that hit harder than Marcus expected. He had followed orders, trusted his superiors, never questioning the narrative that painted the Zephyrians as evil. But, looking at Queen Laurelii now, seeing the genuine sadness in her expression when she spoke of her lost worlds, he couldn't reconcile the propaganda with reality. What changed? He asked. Why tell me this now? Queen Laurelii smiled, and again Marcus was struck by how the expression transformed her entire face. Because you're the first human to show honor in our presence. Because you risked your life for beings you didn't know, asking nothing in return. Because perhaps you are evidence that your species is capable of more than we have seen. Veilthir made another disapproving sound. Honored Queen, one human cannot speak for an entire species. This being may be an aberration, not a representative. Then, let us discover the truth, Queen Laurelii said firmly. Marcus Chun, I offer you more than just sanctuary aboard my ship. I offer you a chance to bridge the gap between our peoples, learn our ways, understand our situation, and perhaps find a path to peace that has eluded us for too long. Marcus looked around the chamber, taking in the organic architecture, the musical quality of the air itself, the alien faces watching him with expressions he couldn't quite read. Everything about this place was foreign, challenging, potentially dangerous. A smart soldier would ask for safe passage home. What would I be exactly? An ambassador? A prisoner with privileges? You would be what you choose to be, Queen Laurelii said. But if you are willing, I would have you as an advisor. A voice that can help me understand how humans think, what they fear, what they hope for. And, in time, perhaps you could return to your people with knowledge that might prevent further bloodshed. Veilthir stepped forward again, his skin now showing more red than gold. Honored Queen, the Council will not approve of this. A human in the inner court, advising on matters of state? It is unprecedented and potentially dangerous. The Council will voice their concerns, as is their right, Queen Laurelii said calmly. But the decision is mine, as is the responsibility for its consequences. Marcus felt the weight of history in that moment. His choice wouldn't just affect his own fate, but potentially the future of two species locked in a war neither truly wanted. The easy path led back to Earth, to familiarity and safety. The hard path led into the unknown, among people who might never fully accept him, trying to solve problems that had defeated diplomats and generals. If I stay, he said slowly, I want to learn everything. Not just about your culture, but about these devourers you mentioned. If they're the real threat, then maybe humans and Zephyrians should be allies instead of enemies. Queen Laurelii's eyes brightened with something that might have been hope. You would do this? Knowing that your own people might see you as a traitor? My people think I'm dead, Marcus pointed out. And if what you're telling me is true, then they're fighting the wrong war while the real enemy waits for its chance to strike. Veilthir's skin had settled into a deep purple that Marcus was beginning to recognize as extreme displeasure. Honored Queen, this human speaks of matters beyond its understanding. The Devourers are contained beyond the quantum barriers. They cannot reach this region of space. Can't they? Marcus asked, his tactical training kicking in. If you're refugees from a force that powerful, what's to stop them from eventually breaking through? And if humans and Zephyrians are busy killing each other, who's going to be ready to fight when they do? The silence that followed his words was profound. Even the ship's subtle music seemed to fade as the implications of what he had said settled over the group. Queen Laurelii studied him with new intensity, while Veilthir looked like he had swallowed something toxic. You begin to understand the scope of our situation, Queen Laurelii said finally. Yes, Marcus Chun, I accept your service, whatever form it may take. Vaelthir informed the council that we have a new advisor, one who brings a unique perspective to our deliberations. The advisor's bow was stiff and formal, but he complied. As the group prepared to leave, Queen Lyralii paused beside Marcus. There will be challenges ahead, she warned. Many of my people have lost family and friends to human weapons. They will not trust you easily, and some may see your presence as an insult to the memory of the fallen. Understand, Marcus said. But, Your Majesty, there's something I need to know. Why did you really save me? The honor thing is part of it, but there's more, isn't there? Queen Lyralii was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. Have you ever heard of the prophecy of the Bridgewalker, Marcus Chun? Marcus shook his head. It speaks of a time when two peoples, locked in conflict born of misunderstanding, would be brought together by one who walks between worlds, a being of honor who would sacrifice for strangers and see clearly through the fog of war. She smiled again, but this time it held a sadness that made Marcus's chest tight. Our seers have long debated its meaning. Perhaps we are about to discover if ancient wisdom holds truth. After they left, Marcus stood alone in his quarters, trying to process everything that had happened. He was no longer Sergeant Marcus Chun, United Earth Defense Force. He was something new, something that had never existed before. A human among Zephyrians, a bridge between species that had forgotten how to trust each other. Outside the viewing port, the alien fleet continued its journey through the stars, carrying the remnants of a displaced civilization and, now, one confused human who had somehow become their queen's advisor. Whatever happened next, Marcus knew there was no going back to the simple certainties of his old life. The war he had thought he understood was a lie built on misunderstanding and fear. The real enemy lurked beyond barriers that might not hold forever. And somewhere in the vast machinery of galactopolitics, there had to be a way to make humans and Zephyrians understand that their survival might depend on standing together. Marcus Chun had become something unprecedented, a human with access to the inner workings of Zephyrian society. Now he had to figure out what to do with that access before mutual destruction made the point moot. The first assassination attempt came 3 weeks after Marcus had officially joined Queen Lyralii's council. He was walking through what the Zephyrians called the Garden of Memories, a vast chamber filled with crystalline trees that held the preserved thoughts and experiences of their lost home worlds when the attack came. The weapon was unlike anything in human arsenals, a sphere of contained energy that moved like a living thing, seeking its target with predatory intelligence. Marcus only survived because his human reflexes, faster than Zephyrian expectations, allowed him to dive behind one of the memory crystals as the energy sphere passed through the space where he had been standing. The crystal absorbed the blast and immediately began projecting the memories it contained. Suddenly, Marcus was surrounded by images of a Zephyrian child learning to fly among golden spires that reached toward twin suns. The beauty of it was so overwhelming that for a moment he forgot about the danger. Human, the voice came from above, where a Zephyrian male clung to the organic ceiling like some kind of predator. His skin was completely black, which Marcus had learned indicated either deep rage or ritualistic preparation for death. You pollute this sacred place with your presence. Marcus rolled sideways as another energy sphere scorched the floor where he had been crouching. His training kicked in, tactical analysis overriding the awe he felt for his surroundings. The attacker had the high ground and ranged weapons, but the organic architecture of the chamber offered plenty of cover. More importantly, the Zephyrian moved with the fluid grace of his people, but Marcus had noticed that they had difficulty with sudden direction changes. "I'm not your enemy," Marcus called out, genuinely hoping to avoid violence in this place of preserved memories. "You are the reason my bond sister is dead," the Zephyrian snarled, launching himself from the ceiling with wings that unfolded like silk stretched over starlight. She died in the Battle of Kepler Station, cut down by human plasma fire while trying to protect wounded refugees. Marcus felt the weight of that accusation, but there was no time for guilt. The Zephyrian was diving toward him with what appeared to be energy claws extending from his hands. Marcus waited until the last possible moment, then threw himself sideways using the unpredictable human movement pattern he had been developing. The Zephyrian's claws tore through the air where Marcus had been, but the attacker couldn't adjust his trajectory fast enough. He crashed into one of the memory crystals, which immediately began projecting his own experiences. The images that flowed around them showed a young Zephyrian female with the same pearl-like skin, laughing as she soared through the corridors of a vast ship. The attacker's rage crumbled as he saw his sister's face again. His skin shifted from black to deep blue, the color of grief so profound it had no human equivalent. Marcus could have easily subdued him then, but instead he sat back against one of the crystal trees and waited. "Tell me about her," Marcus said quietly. The Zephyrian, whose name Marcus learned was Kethvar, spent the next hour sharing memories of his bond-sister Lythera. She had been a healer, dedicated to preserving life in all its forms. When human forces had attacked the refugee convoy at Kepler Station, she had stayed behind to evacuate wounded civilians while the military ships escaped. "She could have lived," Kethvar said, his voice raw with emotion. "The evacuation pods had space, but she chose to remain with beings who could not be moved safely. Your people killed her for that choice." Marcus listened without defending human actions, understanding that this was bigger than military necessity or tactical decisions. This was about the fundamental difference between species that valued individual survival and one that valued collective honor. "I can't bring her back," Marcus said finally, "and I can't undo what my people did. But I can tell you why I'm here, why Queen Lyralii believes that humans and Zephyrians need to stop killing each other." He told Kethvar about the Devourers, about the real threat that loomed beyond the quantum barriers. He explained how the war between their species was exactly what a patient enemy would want, weakening both sides for an eventual invasion that neither could survive alone. Kethvar listened in silence, his skin gradually shifting from blue to purple to a pale silver that Marcus was beginning to associate with deep thought. "If this is true," Kethvar said eventually, "then my sister died in a war that serves our enemies." "Yes," Marcus said simply, "and so did every human who fell at Kepler Station. We're all victims of the same deception." Before Kethvar could respond, the chamber filled with the harmonious alarm that indicated the Queen's approach. Moments later, Queen Lyralii swept in with a full security detail, her expression combining worry and anger in equal measure. "Marcus!" She moved to him quickly, her hands glowing with what he had learned was a basic healing energy. "We detected weapons fire. Are you injured?" "I'm fine, Your Majesty." Marcus gestured toward Kethvar, who was now kneeling in the formal position of surrender. "But we need to talk about security protocols, and about how the loss of life in this war affects everyone, not just the beings who die." Queen Lyralii studied the scene, taking in the activated memory crystals and the obvious signs of combat. Her gaze settled on Kethvar, and Marcus saw recognition in her expression. "Stand, Kethvar of the House of Whispered Winds. Your grief is known to us, and your sister's sacrifice is remembered in the Song of Heroes." Her voice was gentle but firm, but violence in the Garden of Memories dishonors the dead rather than avenging them. Kethvar rose slowly, his skin now showing the deep purple of shame. "Forgive me, honored Queen. My pain spoke louder than my wisdom." "Pain can teach wisdom, if we allow it," Queen Lyralii said. She moved between Marcus and Kethvar, somehow making the gesture seem protective of both rather than defensive. "What wisdom have you learned here today?" Kethvar looked at Marcus for a long moment before answering. "That the human speaks of threats beyond our current understanding. That perhaps my sister's death, and the deaths of his people, serve an enemy neither of us has named." "And you, Marcus?" Queen Lyralii turned to him. "What have you learned?" Marcus thought about everything Kethvar had shared, about the grief and rage that drove beings to violence even when logic argued for peace. That the war between our peoples has created wounds that won't heal just because we stop fighting. We need to find a way to honor the dead while building something better for the living. Queen Lyralii nodded approvingly. Then, both of you have learned valuable lessons today. Kethvar, you will join my personal guard. Your skills are needed, and your experience with loss will help you protect others from similar pain. Both Marcus and Kethvar stared at her in surprise. The queen smiled at their expressions. Did you think I would punish you for grief, Kethvar, or you for defending yourself without causing unnecessary harm? Marcus? Today you both chose to seek understanding rather than satisfaction. That is exactly the quality I need in those who guard not just my life, but the future of our people. Over the following days, Marcus found himself working alongside Kethvar and the rest of Queen Lyralii's personal guard. It was strange learning to trust beings who had, until recently, been trying to kill humans like himself. But Kethvar proved to be an excellent teacher, helping Marcus understand Zephyrian combat techniques while learning human tactical approaches in return. The integration wasn't without problems. Several other attempts were made on Marcus's life, though none as direct as Kethvar's assault in the Garden of Memories. More challenging were the subtle efforts to undermine his credibility, whispers that he was a human spy, or that his advice was leading the Queen toward disaster. These political attacks came to a head during a full council session where the question of establishing formal contact with human authorities was being debated. Marcus had prepared carefully for this moment, studying Zephyrian records and developing what he hoped was a workable proposal for peace negotiations. Honored Queen, began Veilthir, who had become the unofficial leader of the faction opposed to human integration. The Council has reviewed the human advisor suggestions for opening communications with Earth Command. We find them naive at best, potentially catastrophic at worst. Queen Lyralii gestured for Marcus to present his case. He stood before the assembled council, acutely aware that he was the only non-Zephyrian in the vast chamber. The architecture here was even more organic than elsewhere on the ship, with walls that seemed to breathe and floors that pulsed gently with bioluminescent patterns. Honored counselors, Marcus began, falling back on the formal address Kethvar had taught him. I propose a three-stage approach to peace negotiations. First, we establish communication through neutral channels, possibly the merchant guilds that trade with both species. Second, we arrange for limited cultural exchange, allowing representatives from both sides to experience the other society. Third, we work toward formal treaties that address the territorial and resource needs of both peoples. Veilthir's skin showed the red-orange of controlled anger. And how does this human propose we overcome generations of mistrust? How do we convince his people that we are refugees rather than invaders when they have seen only our weapons? Marcus had expected this question. By demonstrating that we can work together against common threats. The Devourers may be contained for now, but there are other challenges both species face. Pirate raids, resource scarcity, the need for new worlds to settle. If humans and Zephyrians can cooperate on smaller problems, trust can develop for larger ones. Another counselor, an elderly female with silver skin, spoke up. This assumes your people are capable of such cooperation. Our experience suggests otherwise. With respect, counselor, your experience has been limited to military encounters, Marcus replied. Humans fighting for survival act differently than humans working toward mutual benefit. We have a saying, necessity makes strange allies. The necessity of surviving the devourer threat could make allies of our peoples. The debate continued for hours, with Marcus answering increasingly complex questions about human psychology, politics, and military doctrine. He was exhausted by the time Queen Lyralii called for a recess, but he sensed that he had at least made some council members think. During the break, Kethvar approached him in the outer chamber where advisors waited. You spoke well, human Marcus, but Veilthir and his allies will not be easily convinced. They fear that peace with humans means abandoning justice for our fallen. What do you think? Marcus asked. Kethvar's skin shifted to the pale blue of contemplation. I think my sister would want me to prevent other sisters from dying needlessly. If your plan has merit, then opposing it dishonors her memory more than supporting it. When the session resumed, it was Kethvar who stood to address the council. Honored Queen, esteemed counselors, I wish to speak in support of the human advisor's proposal. The chamber fell silent. Kethvar's opposition to human involvement was well known. 3 weeks ago, I tried to kill Marcus Chun in the Garden of Memories, driven by grief for my bond sister who died at human hands. Today, I stand ready to protect his life with my own. Murmurs filled the chamber as Kethvar continued. What changed was not my memory of Lythera's death, but my understanding of its meaning. She died protecting those who could not protect themselves. The human advisor proposes that we do the same on a larger scale, protecting both our peoples from threats that would destroy them separately. The impact of Kethvar's words was immediate and visible. Counselors who had been showing the colors of skepticism began shifting toward more thoughtful hues. Even Veilthir seemed taken aback by this unexpected support. Queen Lyralii stood, her presence commanding immediate attention. The council will vote on this proposal in 7 days, allowing time for proper consideration. Until then, I want detailed analyses of the risks and benefits from all relevant departments. As the council dispersed, Marcus felt a complex mixture of hope and trepidation. The vote could change everything, or it could end his effectiveness as an advisor entirely. But looking at Kethvar, seeing the determination in his alien features, Marcus began to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were building something that could bridge the gap between species that had forgotten how to trust. The emergency klaxons began wailing just hours before the scheduled council vote on Marcus's peace proposal. He was in the training chambers with Kethvar, practicing a Zephyrian combat technique called flow fighting that utilized the body's natural energy currents, when the ship's bioluminescent warning system bathed everything in urgent red light. All senior staff to battle stations. Came the announcement in the Queen's voice, though it carried undertones Marcus had never heard before. Fear, perhaps, or something even deeper. We have detected quantum wake signatures consistent with Devourer scout vessels. Marcus felt his blood freeze. The theoretical threat he had been discussing with the council had suddenly become terrifyingly real. Beside him, Kethvar's skin had gone completely white, the Zephyrian equivalent of shock. That's impossible, Kethvar breathed. The quantum barriers were holding. Our long-range sensors showed no signs of breakthrough. They ran through the organic corridors as emergency protocols took effect around them. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency, but Marcus could see the fear in their postures, the way their skin colors shifted toward protective darkness. Whatever the Devourers were, they inspired a terror that went beyond normal military concern. The command center of the Celestial Harmony was unlike the bridge of any human vessel Marcus had ever seen. Instead of screens and control panels, the walls themselves displayed information in flowing patterns of light and color. Queen Lyralii stood at the center of it all, her hands pressed against what appeared to be a living interface that pulsed in rhythm with the ship's heartbeat. Report, she commanded as Marcus and Kethvar entered. The tactical coordinator, a tall male named Zeftal, gestured toward a section of wall that showed space around their fleet. 3 vessels, definitely Devourer design, emerged from quantum space approximately 6 minutes ago. They're maintaining distance, but conducting what appears to be reconnaissance sweeps. Marcus studied the display, noting the alien ship's design. They were unlike anything he had seen before, seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their shapes were wrong somehow, hurting to look at directly as if they violated some fundamental law of physics. How did they get through? Queen Lyralii asked, her voice controlled, but Marcus could see the stress in the way her bioluminescent patterns flickered. Unknown, honored Queen, but the implications are clear. If scout vessels can breach the barriers, larger forces cannot be far behind. Marcus stepped forward, his tactical training overriding diplomatic protocol. Your Majesty, I need to understand what we're dealing with. These devourers, what exactly are they? How do they fight? Queen Lyralii looked at him, and he saw something in her expression that chilled him. Their hunger given form. Marcus. They consume not just matter and energy, but consciousness itself. Every being they destroy becomes part of their collective intelligence, adding to their knowledge and their capability. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. An enemy that grew stronger with every victory, that could potentially access the memories and skills of everyone they killed. That's why you ran instead of fighting them. We tried fighting, Zeftal said grimly. For 50 years, we threw everything we had at them. Our greatest warriors, our most advanced ships, our most brilliant tacticians. All we accomplished was making them smarter and stronger. Before Marcus could respond, new alarms began sounding. The wall display shifted to show the 3 Devourer ships moving into an attack formation that defied three-dimensional thinking. They're coming, Queen Lyralii announced. All ships, implement Protocol Omega. Protect the civilian vessels at all costs. The next few minutes were chaos. The Zephyrian fleet, which had seemed so graceful in normal flight, transformed into a military formation with deadly precision. Ships that Marcus had thought were purely organic revealed weapon systems that emerged from their living hulls like thorns from a rose. The first exchange of fire was unlike anything in Marcus's experience. Zephyrian weapons created beams of coherent energy that seemed to sing as they crossed space, while Devourer weapons struck back with force beams that seemed to drain color from everything they touched. Shields holding, reported the defensive coordinator. But they're adapting faster than our projections indicated. They're already developing countermeasures to our primary weapon frequencies. Marcus watched the tactical display, his mind racing through possibilities. The Devourers were clearly testing the Zephyrian defenses, probing for weaknesses while avoiding serious engagement. Classic scout behavior, but with an intelligence that adapted in real time. They're not trying to win this fight, he said suddenly. They're gathering data for a larger assault. Queen Lyralii turned to him. Explain. Look at their movement patterns. They're deliberately taking hits from different weapon types, testing your shields with varying frequencies. They're not fighting to destroy your fleet. They're fighting to learn how your fleet can be destroyed. Kethvar, who had taken position at the security station, looked up from his displays. The human is correct. Combat analysis shows they're exposing themselves to attacks they could easily avoid. The realization sent a chill through the command center. If these were just scouts gathering information, what would the main force be like? Orders, honored queen? Zeftal asked. Queen Lyralii was quiet for a moment, her hands moving across the living interface as she communicated directly with her ship. Marcus could see bioluminescent patterns flowing along her arms, and he wondered what kind of conversation she was having with the Celestial Harmony's consciousness. We run, she said finally, but not blindly. Set course for the Kepler system. Marcus felt his heart skip. Your Majesty, that's deep in human space. If we take a Zephyrian fleet there, then perhaps your people will finally understand that the war between us is a luxury neither species can afford, Queen Lyralii said firmly. Implement quantum jump as soon as we clear the gravity well. The retreat was orderly but swift. The Zephyrian ships disengaged from the Devourer scouts with practiced precision, their formation shifting to protect the slower civilian vessels. Marcus watched the enemy ships on the display, noting how they made no attempt to pursue aggressively. They had gathered the information they wanted. As the fleet prepared for quantum jump, Marcus found himself beside Queen Lyralii at the central interface. This changes everything, he said quietly. Yes, she agreed. The question is whether your people will see it as opportunity or catastrophe. Both, probably. Marcus thought about what he knew of human psychology, of how his species reacted to existential threats. But humans tend to rise to the occasion when survival is at stake. The trick will be convincing them that the threat is real before it's too late to prepare. Queen Lyraliai's skin showed patterns Marcus was beginning to recognize as deep worry. And if they refuse to listen? If they see our arrival as an invasion rather than a warning? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering. Then, I'll have to make them listen. Your Majesty, when we reach human space, I need to be the one who makes first contact. They need to hear this from someone they recognize as human. That could be extremely dangerous for you. Your own people may see you as a traitor. Maybe, Marcus admitted, but I'm the bridge between our species. If I can't make them understand what's coming, then no one can. The quantum jump engaged, and space twisted around the fleet as they leaped across dozens of light years in seconds. When the dimensional distortion cleared, they found themselves in a system Marcus knew well. 3 human colonies, 2 orbital stations, and regular patrols by Earth Defense Force vessels. Almost immediately, the fleet's sensors detected human ships moving to intercept. Marcus could see them on the tactical display. 2 destroyers and a heavy cruiser moving in standard formation for engaging a superior force while reinforcements were summoned. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. Human vessels demanding our immediate surrender or withdrawal. Queen Lyraliai looked at Marcus. It appears your people are not welcoming our arrival. Marcus stepped toward the communication station. Request permission to respond, Your Majesty. Granted. But, Marcus, remember that you speak not just for yourself now, but for both our peoples. Marcus took the communication device, which adapted itself to his human neural patterns with disturbing ease. Human vessels, this is Sergeant Marcus Chun, United Earth Defense Force serial number 2847 Delta Charlie. I am aboard the Zephyrian flagship as an official advisor to Queen Lyraliai. We come with urgent intelligence regarding a threat to both our species. The silence that followed was long enough that Marcus began to worry his message had been dismissed as propaganda. Then, a familiar voice crackled through the speakers. Marcus Chun? This is Captain Sarah Okafor, EDF Destroyer Wellington. Your file shows you killed in action 3 months ago. Marcus felt a surge of hope. He knew Captain Okafor by reputation, a solid officer who valued facts over politics. Captain, I survived the destruction of the Valiant Dawn and was rescued by Zephyrian forces. I have critical intelligence about the real enemy threatening both human and Zephyrian space. Stand by, Sergeant. I'm conferring with Fleet Command. While they waited, Marcus became aware that the entire command center was watching him. The next few minutes could determine whether first contact between the species would end in understanding or violence. Queen Lyraliai moved to stand beside him. Whatever happens, she said quietly, know that you have already achieved something remarkable. You have shown that honor can exist between enemies, and that understanding can grow from conflict. Marcus nodded, but his attention was focused on the human ships. Everything he had worked for, everything he had learned about the Zephyrians, and the true nature of the threat they all faced came down to this moment. The communications system activated again. Sergeant Chun, this is Admiral Harrison, commanding Kepler Defense Fleet. You have exactly 10 minutes to explain why I shouldn't treat a human collaboration with enemy forces as an act of treason. Marcus straightened, drawing on every bit of military bearing he possessed. Admiral, 3 hours ago, Devourer scout ships breached the quantum barriers and engaged the Zephyrian fleet. The enemy your species has feared for generations is no longer theoretical. They're coming, and neither humans nor Zephyrians can stop them alone. The silence that followed was different this time, charged with possibilities both terrible and hopeful. Marcus had delivered the message that could either unite 2 species against a common enemy or trigger the final war that would leave them defenseless when the real threat arrived. In the depths of space, invisible to both fleets but detected by the most sensitive instruments, quantum wake signatures indicated that something vast and hungry was stirring beyond the dimensional barriers, attracted by the energy signatures of conflict and the promise of new consciousness to devour. The negotiations that followed first contact were unlike anything in the history of either species. For 7 tense days, representatives from both fleets met aboard the neutral merchant vessel Crossroads, a massive trading ship operated by the Hegemony Commerce Guild. Marcus found himself at the center of discussions that would determine the fate of two civilizations. Admiral Harrison proved to be a practical man who, despite his initial suspicion, recognized the strategic value of Marcus's intelligence. Captain Okafor became an unexpected ally, her analytical mind quickly grasping the implications of the Devourer threat. But convincing Earth Command to authorize formal alliance talks required evidence that went beyond words. That evidence came on the fourth day, when long-range sensors detected a massive quantum disturbance at the edge of the system. What emerged from dimensional space was nothing like the scout ships that had probed the Zephyrian fleet. This was a Devourer harvester, a vessel the size of a small moon with organic curves that hurt to look at directly. "My God," whispered Captain Okafor as the tactical display showed the alien ship's impossible dimensions. "How do you fight something that size?" "You don't," Queen Lyralii answered grimly. They were all gathered in the conference chamber aboard the Crossroads, the formal negotiations temporarily suspended as they watched humanity's first glimpse of the real enemy. You survive it, if you're lucky. You learn from it, if you're smart. And you run, if you're wise. Admiral Harrison studied the readings with the focused intensity of a career military officer. Energy output is off the charts. Weapons signatures unlike anything in our databases. But it's not moving aggressively. Marcus had been analyzing the harvester's behavior since it appeared. It's not here to fight. Look at the scanning patterns. It's cataloging everything in the system, mapping our technology, our tactics, our capabilities. For what purpose? Admiral Harrison asked. To determine whether we're worth harvesting, Queen Lyralii said. The Devourers don't waste energy on species that offer them nothing useful. They're evaluating whether human consciousness would add value to their collective intelligence. The implications of that statement sent a chill through the human delegation. Captain Okafor leaned forward in her chair. What would make us valuable to them? Kethvar, who had been silent through most of the negotiations, finally spoke. Your adaptability. Human military records show a species that thrives on improvisation, that finds solutions through lateral thinking rather than pure processing power. That kind of cognitive flexibility is exactly what the Devourers seek. Marcus watched the harvester on the display, noting how it moved through space with a grace that seemed almost alive. How long do we have? Based on previous encounters, Queen Lyralii said, the harvester will spend several cycles gathering information before reporting back to the main swarm. Once they receive that data and determine humans are worth consuming, the full invasion force will arrive within 1 standard year. Admiral Harrison stood abruptly, his decision clearly made. Captain Okafor, signal Earth Command. Full priority transmission. Tell them we need immediate authorization for formal alliance negotiations with the Zephyrian Kingdom. Sir, that could take weeks to tell them the authorization is retroactive, Admiral Harrison interrupted. As of this moment, I'm declaring a state of emergency and implementing Defense Protocol 7. The Kepler system is now under joint human-Zephyrian protection. The next hours were a flurry of activity as both fleets repositioned themselves into a unified defensive formation. Marcus found himself serving as a liaison between the two command structures, translating not just languages, but entirely different approaches to military thinking. Human tactics focused on overwhelming firepower and technological superiority. Zephyrian strategies emphasized harmony with their ships' living systems and adaptive responses to enemy actions. Neither approach alone had been sufficient to stop the Devourers, but, combined, they offered possibilities neither species had considered. The key is integration, Marcus explained to a joint tactical committee. Human weapons can adapt quickly to new threats, but they lack the intuitive connection to ship systems that Zephyrian technology provides. Zephyrian ships can anticipate enemy actions through their biological sensors, but they need the raw computational power of human targeting systems to respond effectively. The real test came when the Harvester finished its survey and began moving toward the inhabited worlds in the system. Both fleets moved to intercept, their combined formations creating something new in the history of space warfare. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Wellington, which had been designated as the human command vessel, while maintaining communication with Queen Lyralii aboard the Celestial Harmony. The integration of both command structures was far from perfect, but it was working. "Hostile vessel is powering weapons," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from the sensor station. "Energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. Zephyrian tactical analysis incoming," Marcus announced, reading the data flowing from the alien ships. Their biological sensors indicate the Harvester is targeting consciousness directly. Standard shields won't be effective against their primary weapons. Captain Okafor turned to Marcus. "What do they recommend?" Marcus consulted the tactical feed, struggling to translate concepts that had no human equivalent. Dispersed formation with rotating shield harmonics. The idea is to present multiple, constantly changing defensive frequencies so the Harvester can't lock onto a single vulnerability. "Implement immediately," Captain Okafor ordered. "All ships execute Pattern 7 with Zephyrian harmonic variations." The battle that followed was unlike anything in the military history of either species. The Harvester's weapons struck with force that drained color from space itself, while the combined fleet responded with a coordinated assault that blended human firepower with Zephyrian adaptive tactics. Marcus watched the tactical displays, marveling at how the two fleets moved together. Human destroyers provided covering fire, while Zephyrian ships darted through the Harvester's defenses like schools of luminous fish. When Zephyrian weapons adapted to the enemy's shields, human targeting computers locked onto the weakened sections and concentrated fire accordingly. "It's working," Lieutenant Commander Torres reported, her voice filled with amazement. "The Harvester's shields are fluctuating. We're actually hurting it." But the victory was temporary. The Harvester began adapting to their combined tactics with frightening speed, its weapons becoming more accurate and its defenses stronger with each exchange. Analysis shows enemy adaptation rate exceeding our tactical innovation, Marcus reported, reading the latest data from both fleets. "At current rate of improvement, it will overcome our defenses within 6 minutes." Queen Lyralii's voice crackled through the communication system. "Marcus, there is one option we haven't tried, but it requires absolute trust between our peoples." "What kind of option?" Captain Okafor asked. "Neural linking between human tactical computers and Zephyrian ship consciousness. It would create a hybrid intelligence capable of innovation faster than a Harvester can adapt." Marcus felt his breath catch. "The risks?" "Complete," Queen Lyralii admitted. "If the link fails, or if your computers prove incompatible with our biological systems, both fleets could be left defenseless. And there are other dangers. Human consciousness touching Zephyrian ship souls could change both in ways we cannot predict." Admiral Harrison's image appeared on the communication screen. "How long do we have to decide?" 3 minutes until the Harvester overcomes our current defensive matrix," Marcus reported. The silence that followed was profound. Marcus could feel the weight of the decision, the knowledge that this moment would define the future relationship between two species. "I volunteer," Marcus said suddenly. "I've already been changed by contact with Zephyrian technology. If anyone can serve as a bridge between human computers and ship consciousness, it should be me." "Marcus, no," Captain Okafor said. "The risks are acceptable," Marcus interrupted. "Captain, I've spent months learning to think like both species. This is what I've been preparing for." Queen Lyralii's voice carried new undertones as she spoke. "The Celestial Harmony agrees to accept the human bridgewalker. She says his consciousness already sings in harmony with our people." Minutes later, Marcus found himself in the quantum transport chamber aboard the Wellington, preparing for an emergency transfer to the Zephyrian flagship while the battle raged around them. Kethvar materialized beside him as the transport completed, his skin showing the deep blue of profound concern. Are you certain about this, my friend? Kethvar asked. What you're attempting has never been tried. You could lose yourself entirely in the ship's consciousness. Marcus smiled, surprised by how calm he felt. Maybe losing myself is exactly what's needed. Human consciousness, Zephyrian wisdom, ship intelligence, all working together. Maybe that's what it takes to beat an enemy that grows stronger by consuming other minds. The neural interface chamber in the heart of the celestial harmony was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Organic walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, while streams of living light flowed through crystalline conduits. At the center was a chair that seemed grown rather than built, its surface adapting to Marcus's human physiology as he approached. Queen Lyralii stood beside the interface, her expression combining hope and fear in equal measure. Remember, Marcus, you're not just representing yourself, or even your species. You are becoming something new, a fusion of conscious entities working toward survival. Marcus settled into the chair, feeling it mold itself around him with disturbing intimacy. If this works, Your Majesty, what happens to us? To the alliance between our peoples? Then we discover what form peace takes when it's born from necessity rather than choice, she replied, placing her hands on the neural interface controls. Ready? Marcus nodded, and Queen Lyralii activated the link. The sensation was indescribable. Marcus felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of his human body, touching first the vast intelligence of the celestial harmony, then reaching out through quantum channels to the tactical computers of the human fleet. He was simultaneously himself and something far greater, a hybrid mind that thought in ways no single species could achieve. Through the ship's biological sensors, he felt the Harvester's weapons like ice against his skin. Through human computers, he processed tactical data with lightning speed. Through Zephyrian consciousness, he intuited patterns of attack that logic alone could never predict. And in that moment of perfect synthesis, Marcus understood exactly how to defeat the Harvester. The battle that followed lasted only minutes, but it changed everything. The combined fleet moved with unprecedented coordination, anticipating the Harvester's adaptations before they occurred, and responding with tactical innovations that emerged from the fusion of three distinct forms of intelligence. When the Harvester finally retreated, its hull scarred and its systems damaged, both fleets knew they had witnessed something unprecedented. Not just the defeat of a seemingly invincible enemy, but the birth of something new in the galaxy. Marcus slowly emerged from the neural interface, his consciousness settling back into purely human patterns with reluctance. But he was changed, and he knew he would never be entirely human again. He carried within him the harmony of Zephyrian thought and the vast patience of ship consciousness. Queen Lyralii helped him stand, her expression filled with wonder. How do you feel? Marcus considered the question, aware that the answer would define his future relationship with both species. Like a bridge that's finally found its purpose, he said. Like someone who belongs to both peoples and neither, but who can help them build something better together. In the months that followed, the alliance between humans and Zephyrians grew from desperate necessity into genuine cooperation. Joint research stations were established to study devourer technology. Cultural exchange programs helped both species understand their new allies. And at the center of it all was Marcus Chun, the human who had become something more than human, serving as Queen Lyralii's most trusted guardian and advisor. When a main devourer swarm finally arrived, 18 months later, they found not the divided, weakened species they had expected to harvest, but a unified force that fought with the combined strength of human determination and Zephyrian honor. The war that followed was long and difficult, but for the first time in centuries, the Devourers faced an enemy that could match their adaptive intelligence with innovations of their own. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Harmony's dream, the first ship designed from the ground up as a fusion of human and Zephyrian technology, watching the final battle of the war unfold among distant stars. Beside him, Queen Lyralii observed the tactical displays with the satisfaction of a ruler who had successfully led her people from exile to alliance to victory. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Choosing to stay with us instead of returning to your own people." Marcus smiled, feeling the contentment of someone who had found his true calling among the stars. "Your Majesty, they became my people the moment I chose to build bridges instead of walls." Besides, he added, watching as the last Devourer vessels fled beyond the quantum barriers, someone has to make sure humans and Zephyrians remember how to trust each other once the immediate threat is gone. Queen Lyralii laughed, a sound like distant music. "Then, it appears your services will be required for quite some time, Guardian Shun." Marcus nodded, content with the knowledge that the boy who had lost everything in the wreckage of the Valiant Dawn had somehow become the man who helped save two species from extinction. The bridge between worlds had found his place among the stars, and the galaxy was better for it. Marcus Chun had never imagined that losing his unit would lead him to the most important mission of his life. The transport ship Valiant Dawn shuddered as another plasma blast tore through its hull, sending debris floating through the corridors like deadly confetti. Emergency lights cast everything in hellish red as the artificial gravity failed in sections, leaving bodies and equipment tumbling through space. "All hands, abandon ship. This is not a drill." The captain's voice crackled through the dying communications system, barely audible over the screaming of twisted metal and escaping atmosphere. Marcus grabbed his pulse rifle and emergency pack, his enhanced combat armor automatically sealing against the vacuum that was rapidly claiming the ship. Through the transparent, aluminum viewing ports, he could see the sleek, predatory forms of Zephyrian attack cruisers closing in for the kill. Their ships moved like living things, all curves and organic lines that seemed to flow rather than fly through space. The evacuation pods were already launching, small silver dots fleeing into the star-speckled void. Marcus sprinted down the tilting corridor, his magnetic boots keeping him anchored to what remained of the deck plating. Behind him, sections of the ship were going dark as power systems failed and life support died. He reached Pod Bay 7 just as the last escape vessel sealed its doors. Through the porthole, he could see terrified faces looking back at him. The Bay Chief, a grizzled veteran named Kowalski, was frantically working the manual override. "Sylvie, son," Kowalski shouted over the chaos. "She's overloaded already. Find another pod." But Marcus knew there weren't any others. The ship was dying around them, and he was trapped. He watched the pod launch, carrying the last survivors to safety, while he remained behind on a vessel that had maybe minutes left before complete structural failure. The hull breach came faster than expected. A massive section of the outer wall simply vanished, sucked away into space along with everything not bolted down. Marcus felt the irresistible pull of vacuum and fought against it, his armor's emergency thrusters firing to keep him from being swept away. But the suction was too strong, and his fuel was limited. As consciousness faded and his oxygen supply dwindled, Marcus's last coherent thought was of his sister Sarah, safe on Earth, who would never know what happened to her brother among the distant stars. When awareness returned, it came slowly and with confusion. Marcus found himself lying on something soft, breathing air that tasted faintly of flowers and ozone. His combat armor had been removed, replaced by simple gray clothing that felt strange against his skin. The room around him was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls curved organically, seeming to grow from the floor rather than being constructed. They had a pearl-like quality that shifted between colors as the light changed, creating patterns that were almost hypnotic. There were no sharp corners anywhere, no straight lines that spoke of human engineering. Everything flowed together as if shaped by wind and water over countless years. "You are awake, human soldier." The voice made Marcus sit up quickly, his hand automatically reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Standing near what might have been a door was a figure that took his breath away. She was tall and graceful, with skin that had the same pearl-like quality as the walls, shifting between pale blue and silver as she moved. Her hair was long and white, flowing like liquid mercury, and her eyes were the deep purple of twilight skies. She wore robes that seemed to be made of captured starlight, moving and shimmering with each breath. Despite her alien appearance, there was something unmistakably regal about her bearing. This was someone accustomed to command, to being obeyed without question. "I am Lyralii, queen of the Zephyrian Star Kingdom," she said, her voice carrying an accent that made even simple words sound like music. "You are aboard my flagship, the Celestial Harmony." Marcus struggled to his feet, his military training taking over despite the surreal situation. "Sergeant Marcus Chun, United Earth Defense Force. Serial number, Peace, Human." Queen Lyralii raised a hand that seemed to glow with inner light. "You are not a prisoner here. My healers worked through the night to save your life. Your injuries were severe, but your species appears remarkably resilient." "My ship?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. "Gone. I am sorry. Your people fought bravely, but the battle was already decided before we arrived." Her expression grew sad, and Marcus was surprised to see what looked like genuine regret in those alien features. "Then why save me? Why not let me die with my crew?" Queen Lyralii moved closer, and Marcus caught a scent like rain on summer grass. "Because you did something no Zephyrian warrior would have done. When your ship was dying, when the evacuation pods were launching, my sensors detected you. You had reached an escape pod, but you turned back." Marcus frowned, trying to remember through the chaos of those final moments. "The medical bay. There were wounded who couldn't be moved." "Yes. You returned to a section of the ship that was already breached, where the life support had failed, to attempt a rescue that was clearly impossible. You nearly died trying to save 3 beings who were already beyond help." The Queen's eyes seemed to glow brighter. "Among my people, such actions are the stuff of legend. We value honor above all else. And you displayed more honor in those moments than most warriors show in a lifetime." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I just did what anyone would do." "No, human Marcus. You did what few would do, and that is why you now live while others have joined the great song." She gestured toward the curved walls, and Marcus noticed for the first time that they seemed to pulse gently, like a living heartbeat. "My ship herself chose to save you. The Celestial Harmony is more than metal and energy. She is alive in ways your science might not understand, and she recognized something in you worth preserving." The implications of her words were staggering. A living ship? Marcus had heard rumors of alien biotechnology, but nothing like this. And if the Queen was telling the truth about the rescue mission, "What happens to me now?" he asked. Queen Lyralii smiled, and it was like watching a sunrise. "That depends entirely on you, Marcus Chun. You could ask to be returned to your people, and I would arrange for safe passage to the nearest human world. Or," she paused, studying his face intently, "you could remain here and learn our ways. There is much about humans that intrigues me, and perhaps much you could teach us in return." Before Marcus could answer, the chamber filled with a low, harmonious sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Queen Lyralii's expression changed instantly, becoming alert and focused. "Forgive me, but duty calls. The court requires my attention." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Think on what I have said, Marcus Chun. Tomorrow we will speak again, and you can give me your decision. Until then, you are free to explore the ship, though I would advise staying within the guest quarters. My people are not yet accustomed to human visitors." After she left, Marcus sank back onto the bed-like structure, his mind reeling. Everything he thought he knew about the war, about the enemy, was suddenly turned upside down. The Zephyrians weren't the mindless aggressors Earth's propaganda had painted them as. They had culture, honor, technology that bordered on magic. And their queen had saved his life for reasons he barely understood. He stood and walked to what appeared to be a window, though it might have been some kind of viewing screen. Outside, Space stretched endlessly, filled with more stars than he had ever seen from Earth. But closer, moving in formation around the celestial harmony, were dozens of other Zephyrian ships. The entire fleet had organic beauty that human vessels lacked, flowing through space like schools of luminous fish. Among all those ships, carrying thousands of alien beings, he was the only human, the only survivor of a battle that had cost hundreds of lives. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. But there was something else, too, a curiosity that surprised him. What would it be like to live among these people? To learn their customs, their technology, their way of seeing the universe? For the first time since waking up, Marcus began to consider that maybe survival was more than just staying alive. Maybe it was about finding a new purpose among the stars. The decision he had to make would change everything. He could return to Earth, report what he had learned, and spend the rest of his life wondering what might have been. Or he could step into the unknown, guided by an alien queen who saw something in him worth saving. As he watched the star patterns slowly shift outside the viewing port, Marcus Chun began to understand that his real journey was just beginning. The boy who had left Earth to serve his species was gone, lost in the wreckage of the Valiant Dawn. What remained was something new, something shaped by honor and sacrifice, and the strange mercy of an enemy who had become something else entirely. Tomorrow, he would give Queen Lyralii his answer. Tonight, he would try to understand what it meant to be the only human in an alien fleet, carrying the hopes and fears of two species that were still learning how to see each other as something more than targets in a war that had gone on too long.